hadn't come tonight, you would never have known that. Because of that, I'm going to sit down rather than stand. I don't feel the arthritic knee so much that way. Gosh, I'm logical tonight. Thank you. I get asked an awful lot, what made you take up the mouth organ? Well, I was about 12 years old. I read in the paper in Baltimore, Maryland, that's where I come from, that a mouth organ band was being formed that night at the City Hall. So out of curiosity, I went down to see what it was like. There was a man from Germany named Fred Sonnen, and he just struck me being a natural teacher. So I bought a mouth organ, got in his group, and then about a year and a half or so later, they had a competition. And I got to the finals, and after all of the finals had played, the judge of the competition was Gustav Struby. He was a conductor of the Baltimore Symphony. He came out and he said, "We have given the award to Lawrence Cecil Adler with an average of 99 and 9 tenths. And one is tilted." So there I was the champion. So here is what I played. Well, as a matter of fact, I'm going to tell you I cheated in a way. Because when I knew that Struby was the leader, I thought he'd like classical music better than popular, so I played Beethoven. And here's what I played. I could have done a counterpoint of those two voices going against each other. Probably played it like this. They won anyway. who not only was recognized by the general public as the greatest, but by his colleagues, like Cole Porter, like Richard Rodgers, like Jerome Kern. They thought he was the greatest. And yet, in his lifetime, George Gershwin never had the biggest hit of any given year. And it was only after he died that a posthumous piece came out, Love Walked In, and that was the hit of the year, and I so regretted that George never had a chance to know that he had written the #1 hit. We've never played that. You know it? He knows everything. He'll make me sick. Kind of show I like doing best, but everything is Adler. Completely Freudian. I suppose with my name I should call it Adlerian. Oh, we have an intellectual crowd. I didn't think you'd get that. I thought of a musical joke. You haven't heard this, I don't think. A man walks into the Philadelphia Symphony. They're having a rehearsal and they've just broken for coffee. And this man says to the orchestra manager, "Sir, I would like you to know that I'm a virtuoso on every single instrument in the orchestra." And the manager says, "Well, I'll take your word for it, but I think I better tell you right now, there is a waiting list of at least 2 years for every desk in this orchestra. We have no room for another musician." So the man, "Well, give me a break, for God's sake," and he picks up a violin. He goes into the Joachim cadenza of the Beethoven violin concerto. And the musicians put down their coffee, they stop playing cards, and they applaud him, because the man undoubtedly is good. The man says, "Look, you didn't have to prove it to me. I took your word, I know you're good. There just isn't room for another. Give me a break!" And he picks up a viola, goes into the most difficult part of Harold in Italy. The man says, "Look, you're wasting my time, I'm wasting your time. I don't care how good you are, I don't care if you're the greatest musician in the world. There simply isn't room in the orchestra for another musician. And then, well, I'll be a no good, dirty son of a bitch. He said, ah, that's different. We can always use a conductor. Like that. There's a nice story about in Miami Beach, a woman speaks to a man. She says, forgive my speaking to you, we haven't been introduced. But I couldn't help but notice, while everybody else has a suntan, you're extremely pale. Why? Well, I'll tell you why. I just got released from Sing Sing prison. I served 28 years. 28 years? What did you do to deserve a sentence of 28 years? He said, I murdered my wife. She said, oh, you're single. Funny Valentine, Rogers and Hart. obviously musicians, but they've all met each other. I must tell you one thing. In my nearly 70 years of professional playing of music, it follows that I've worked with many and many a pianist, and he's one of them. Don't, it'll go to his head. Don't do that. never let you do solos. You see the difference in the applause? Oh, I hate every one of you. two men playing golf, and two women playing ahead of them, playing very slowly. So one of the men says to the other, look, I'm going to ask them to let us play through. I'm sure you won't mind. So he goes over the hill, comes back and says to the other man, my God, I'm so lucky they didn't see me. One is my wife, the other is my mistress. The man said, I'll go. He goes over, comes back, and he says, small world, isn't it? Here's one of my favorites. There's a Jew and a Chinese play gin rummy every Saturday in Hong Kong. And one day the Jew said to the Chinese, I want to ask you something. I know you're a good 20 years older than I am. You look 15 years younger. And what I want to know is it your religion, your philosophy, what? And the Chinese said, well, Sam, if you hadn't brought it up, I'd never have mentioned it. But you see, I'm a Buddhist. And we Buddhists do everything in moderation. Nothing is rushed. For example, when I'm in bed with my wife, I begin to caress her, but I don't go all the way through to a climax. I stop. I go to the kitchen, I brew some rice wine. I bring back the wine, we pour glasses of it, we sip the wine, then we put the wine aside, I begin to caress her again. After a while I stop. I get a book, The Analects of Confucius, and I read to her. I put the book aside, and then and only then do we proceed to the true climax of lovemaking. The Jew said, that's fantastic. And that night in bed, he begins to caress his wife, which he hasn't done for 19 years. After a while, he stops, goes to the kitchen, makes Russian tea in a glass with lemon. Brings her to the bed, they sip the tea, put the tea aside, begins to caress her again, he stops. He gets the Jewish Chronicle. He reads her an account of a week in the Knesset, in Hebrew. Puts the magazine aside, begins to caress her again. She said, Seymour, what's come over you? You're screwing like a Chinaman. I can't get a laugh out of saying I probably, but I did. I probably am the only living person, there's no way of proving this, it's just something that I think, probably the only living person who played the Rhapsody in Blue with George Gershwin. This was at a party in New York in 1934, and our host, a man named Jules Glenser, he was the head of the Cartier jewelry company, he suddenly announced, Larry and George are going to play the Rhapsody in Blue. He didn't ask me if I knew it. And George went to the piano. I don't know how to explain this. Two musicians have what in New York is called rapport. You didn't get that at all. I'll try it again in French. Anyway, when we finished Rhapsody, George got up, put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, the goddamn thing sounds as if I wrote it for you. All I can tell you is, to me, the goddamn thing still does. George made a piano roll of the Rhapsody in Blue, and Ira Gershwin got that piano roll for me, and we edited it so that it sounds as if George were accompanying me, so that today in 1997, I'm able to reproduce the duet that George Gershwin and I did in 1934. Therefore, the first notes you hear now will be those of George Gershwin himself playing Rhapsody in Blue.
Mr. Larry Adler. Larry Adler, ladies and gentlemen. Larry Adler. Single partner, Tom Hill, and I'm Paul Sawtell. Fabulous first half. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It has been an absolute privilege to have what is an absolute living legend here for the last couple of days. He will be back on stage in a few minutes' time. Can I first of all welcome back on stage the Paul Sawtell Trio, Stephen Palmer on drums, Mr. Tom Hill on bass, and of course, Mr. Paul Sawtell. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back on stage the fabulous Mr. Larry Adler.
I was in Australia 2 months ago, and I was playing, I guess she was my woman now from Porgy Best, and it suddenly occurred to me that this was a melody that bore comparison to Wagner's Liederstadt. And then 2 months later, I picked up a magazine, and there was an article about George Gershwin I'd never read before, and he claimed in it that Wagner was his inspiration for Porgy Best. That was pure coincidence, I didn't know that. But I think that the melody is one of the greatest ever written by anybody. I'm going to play it now. Oh, I must tell you, while I was in Australia, I was getting a sound check at the Sydney Opera House, and my youngest daughter walked in. She had flown from London to Sydney without telling me. It was a surprise. She wanted to hear Daddy play at the Opera House. I nearly cried. Probably the riskiest joke I ever made. Not risky in the French of the French risque, but risky, taking a risk. Ira gave me a string quartet that George Gershwin had written. It had never been played nor published in George's lifetime. Morton Gould orchestrated it for mouth organ and symphonic strings. I recorded it. But my first chance to play it in public was in Belfast. And it said in the program that the quartet had been given to me by George Gershwin's beautiful widow, Ira. Well, I had to straighten that out, so I said, George never had a widow. You have to take certain preliminary steps to acquire one. But George never took them. I said, it was given to me not by his widow, but by his brother, Ira. I said, and only a schmuck like me would stand up in Belfast to plug a name spelled I-R-A. I say the riskiest joke I ever made. Ira told me when they were auditioning girls for a show, and they wanted to see if one of the singers could read music, so they gave her Franz Lehar's Indian Love Call, and she picked up the music and says, when I'm calling you, 00, 00. Then there's another girl who auditioned, she says, you say either, and I say either. You know, tonight is the Jewish New Year, and if I were a good Jewish boy, I'd be in synagogue. But obviously I'm a bad Jewish boy. There is a story about a fellow who says to his father, Dad, you know George? The old man said, George, sure, he's a nice boy, I like George. Dad, I'm glad you like George. I love George. You love George. Doesn't it say in the Bible, man should love his fellow man? I approve. Dad, I don't think I'm getting through to you. I want to marry George. You want to marry George? You're not ashamed to say this to your old religious father? Shame? Disgrace? Scandal? You're going to bring down on my head, that doesn't bother you. You want to marry George. What's the matter with you? Can't you find yourself a nice Jewish boy? Considering what night it is, that's kind of a risky joke too. Here, tonight I'm going to play songs by composers, the works that I love very much. I've worked with them all. Cole Porter, Harold Arlen, Jerome Kern, Frank Lesser. Incidentally, Frank Lesser's wife, Lynn, was known as the evil of two lessers. Thanks for this quote, I didn't make it up. Here is Harold Arlen's song, Stormy Weather. I've never played it before, and incidentally, I never lied to an audience. To them, yes, but not to you. And this melody is called Yesterdays. And much as I admired the Beatles yesterday, this, I think, is one of the superior melodies. Do you know Yesterday? I was hoping you wouldn't. I would so like to get one up on you. Thank you. There was a party in Beverly Hills. It was for Henry Ginsberg. He was the president of Paramount. And Cole Porter arrived. Now, this was an event because Cole Porter had had this dreadful accident. A horse had fallen on him. The horse had refused to jump and landed on Porter and broke both of his legs. And Porter never went out again socially, but he did show up at this party. Now, Frank Sinatra was there, and Frank decided he had to sing for Cole Porter. So Frank's accompanist, Jimmy Van Heusen, went to the piano. Frank sang The Lady's a Tramp. Well, first of all, The Lady's a Tramp is written to be sung by a woman about herself. I don't like parties. The whole thing is for a woman singing about herself. I've never liked it sung by a man, but Sinatra not only sang it, changing the pronouns, but changing the words. In one line, instead of won't dish the dirt with the rest of the girls, Sinatra sang won't dish the dirt with the rest of the broads. Cole Porter said, get me out of here. And I'm told he sent Sinatra a wire, if you don't like my songs the way I write them, why do you sing them?